The galactic confluence was the closest thing to a neutral ground the universe had ever seen. An enormous, kilometers-wide station orbiting a dying star. It was a melting pot of species, cultures, and ambitions, a place where deals were struck, alliances forged, and wars averted, or kindled in secret. To most, humanity was a curiosity, a species too young to be anything but reckless, too unpredictable to be entirely dismissed. They had clawed their way into the interstellar scene, carving a place for themselves among the long-lived, the hyper-advanced, and the anciently powerful. But where others saw them as opportunistic upstarts, the Vorlac Syndicate saw something else, an easy mark. It started with an offer. The Vorlac delegation arrived in a spectacle of self-importance, their flowing bio-silk robes pulsating with pheromonal authority. Their leader, Arch-Trade Executor Vorlac, exuded the confidence of a being who had played this game for centuries and never lost. They were known as master negotiators, their words like finely honed blades, slicing through lesser civilizations, with promises too good to refuse. Captain Elias Vance had seen their kind before. He watched from across the negotiation table, arms folded, expression impassive. The room was packed with representatives from the Terran Diplomatic Corps, analysts, security personnel. The Vorlac, of course, had brought their own entourage, subordinates with crystalline implants, neural synchronizers humming as they tracked the humans' every micro-expression. The offer was simple: the Omega Core, a revolutionary energy generator, capable of providing near-limitless power, enough to push humanity's technological advancement forward by centuries. All they wanted in return was a minor trade concession, exclusive rights to neural resonance data, a seemingly harmless request. It was an easy win. It was a scam. Dr. Lillian Huang leaned forward, her fingers tapping against the table. "Neural resonance data," she echoed, her voice steady. "Explain." A ripple of laughter spread through the Vorlac delegation, polished, artificial, carefully calibrated to be non-threatening. "A mere curiosity," Vorlac assured them. "Nothing invasive. Simply a means to understand human cognition for future collaboration." Lies. Vance knew a hustle when he saw one. And this had all the hallmarks of a classic confidence trick. The too good to refuse deal, the harmless concession, the vague explanations. Humanity had spent centuries dealing with con men, warlords, and corporate oligarchs before they ever left their own solar system. This wasn't new. What was new was the warning. The night before negotiations, a message had arrived, silent, untraceable. It came through secure diplomatic channels, encrypted beyond the standard protocols. A single line of text, a name, Yah'Zuun. The meeting had been arranged in the underbelly of the Confluence, away from prying eyes. Yah'Zuun was unlike any species Vance had encountered. Tall, thin, shifting between solid and translucent, as though reality couldn't quite hold on to them. They spoke in half-words, fragmented concepts that needed more interpretation than direct translation. The Vorlac devour. No survivors. Always different, always the same. You will not be first, but you must be last. The warning had settled in Vance's mind like a parasite. If Yah'Zuun was right, then this wasn't just a scam, it was a trap. The Vorlac weren't offering humanity a deal. They were positioning them for conquest. Back in the negotiation room, Vance leaned forward, his gaze locking onto Vorlac's. "You claim the Omega Core is a benevolent gift," he said, voice calm. "Yet no species that has ever done business with you has prospered." Silence. The Vorlac stilled, ever so slightly. Dr. Huang slid a datapad across the table. "We cross-referenced civilizations that accepted Vorlac trade deals. Without exception, their technological progress stagnated or regressed, resources depleted, governments collapsed, and the Vorlac, always there, just in time to offer assistance." Another ripple of laughter, this one sharper. "Correlation is not causation, humans." Sergeant Malik O'Reilly spoke for the first time. No, but patterns don't lie. He dropped a holo display onto the table, and the room was flooded with images, fractured remnants of civilizations that had once flourished, now desolate. Trade deals that had seemed beneficial until their consequences became irreversible. Entire species left vulnerable, dependent. And at the heart of it all, the Vorlac. For the first time, Vrikal hesitated. Vance didn't let him recover. "You tried to bamboozle us," he said. "But you made a mistake." Another pause. The Vorlac were calculating, adjusting. They could. "Still turn this, still salvage control," Vance smiled. "You underestimated humanity." He leaned back, signaling the conversation was over. "And now we're going to turn the tables." The Vorlac delegation withdrew, their arrogance intact, but their confidence shaken. They were master manipulators, but something about this encounter had not gone as expected. Vance watched them go, his fingers drumming against the polished surface of the negotiation table. A deep exhale escaped him. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. The team reconvened in a secure diplomatic chamber, a space shielded from surveillance by alien or artificial means. Dr. Huang's expression was tight with thought as she projected her analysis. "They're not used to resistance," she said, scrolling through decades of trade records. "Every species they've engaged follows the same trajectory, flourishing at first, then declining into irrelevance. No survivors, no exceptions." O'Reilly crossed his arms, scowling. "Which means we're now the biggest thorn in their..." Sighed. "They won't take this lying down." Vance nodded, turning his gaze toward the silent figure in the corner. Yah'Zuun stood there, barely anchored to the room's reality, shifting like a mirage caught between dimensions. The aliens, voice came as a whisper in the back of their minds. "They will not let you go. Their eyes are everywhere." As if on cue, the room's encrypted communication lines flared to life. Every screen blinked, the emergency override protocol activating. The Confluence's neutral AI, an artificial overseer, designed to prevent diplomatic sabotage, broadcast an urgent alert. Attempted breach detected. Diplomatic data under siege. Origin unknown. Vance didn't need to guess. He turned to Huang. "They're trying to scrub our records." Her hands flew over the interface, rerouting encryption protocols, engaging counter-intrusion measures. "They're not just deleting files. They're rewriting them. If they succeed, the entire record of our meeting will be altered." O'Reilly didn't wait for orders. He was already moving. "I'll handle it." O'Reilly's feet pounded against the station's metal flooring as he sprinted through the lower levels. The Confluence's vast data hubs were located beneath. The diplomatic sector, heavily guarded but accessible to those who knew how to slip between the cracks. The Vorlac had been prepared. A group of agents, tall, lithe figures with pulsating crystalline implants embedded in their skulls, were already inside, interfacing with the station's core AI. Their tendrils of energy pulsed as they worked, rewriting reality in real time. O'Reilly grinned. Not today. With a flick of his wrist, he deployed an EMP charge. It hit the conduits like a silent explosion, sending a shockwave through the Vorlac's delicate neural synchronizers. Their bodies spasmed, overloaded by feedback. In that split second of vulnerability, he moved, a brutal fist to the throat. A strike to the implant's neural junction, a rapid disarm. Within moments, the Vorlac agents were down, their rewritten files left unfinished. Huang's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Tell me you stopped them." O'Reilly wiped a smear of alien blood from his knuckles. "Did better than that. I copied their attempt. We now have evidence they tried to alter diplomatic records." Back in the diplomatic chamber, Vance examined the stolen data. The evidence was clear. Time-stamped modifications, Vorlac encryption, signatures, an undeniable attempt to manipulate history. "They weren't just going to scam us," Huang murmured, studying the data. "They were going to erase any record of resistance, as if the real deal had never happened." Vance exhaled slowly. "Then we make sure it does." But before they could act, another transmission arrived. This time, public. The Vorlac had decided to escalate. The Galactic Confluence's diplomatic channels were flooded with a carefully orchestrated statement from Arch-Trade Executive Rikal himself. It is with deep regret that we must denounce the Terran delegation for engaging in misinformation and diplomatic subterfuge. The Vorlac have always operated with honor and integrity, but it seems humanity's representatives have sought to tarnish our reputation. We request a formal tribunal to address these grievous fabrications. The move was brilliant. They were no longer playing the game in the shadows. They were dragging humanity into the public eye, turning them into the accused. O'Reilly scoffed. Those slippery bastards just called us the con artists. Huang clenched her jaw. And the Confluence will take it seriously. If we can't prove their deception on a scale the Council accepts, we'll lose more than a trade deal. We'll be blacklisted. Humanity will be shut out of galactic trade for decades. Vance leaned back, his mind racing. The Vorlac had forced their hand. Humanity needed to flip the script, turning the tables in full view of the galaxy. His lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. They want to play this publicly? Fine, let's scam the scammers. Humanity's counterplay required a lie wrapped in a greater truth. Huang crafted the deception, a fabricated human breakthrough, something so revolutionary it would entice the Vorlac into making a mistake. They spread word through diplomatic back channels, letting it slip that humanity had been developing a predictive AI system, one capable of forecasting the future with terrifying accuracy. They called it Project Prometheus. The idea was absurd. Even the most advanced galactic civilization struggled with temporal modeling beyond basic probability matrices. The notion that humanity had developed a near-omniscient AI was ridiculous, and yet that was the genius of the lie. The Vorlac couldn't risk not believing it. If it were true, humanity had just leaped beyond them in intelligence warfare. If it were false, they needed to prove it. Either way, they would be forced to act. The trap was set. It didn't take long for the first signs of panic to emerge. The Vorlac were too methodical to show their fear openly, but their actions betrayed them. Intercepted messages revealed an immediate investigation into Prometheus. Diplomatic inquiries tripled. An anonymous buyer on the black market placed an absurd bounty on any leaks regarding humanity's AI capabilities. Then, the final proof. A Vorlac-controlled proxy approached an undercover human intelligence officer, offering a fortune in trade resources for access to Prometheus. They had taken the bait. As the human delegation prepared for the final confrontation, Yah'Zuun stood apart, watching with that strange, otherworldly detachment. "You deceive the deceivers," the alien murmured, its form flickering between dimensions. "But the greatest trick is yet to come." Vance exhaled, feeling the weight of what was to come. Humanity had been underestimated, played for fools. But now, they were about to rewrite the rules of the game. The Vorlac believed they were on the verge of a major intelligence coup. What they didn't realize was that the moment they reached for humanity's fake AI, they would be walking into a publicly broadcasted ambush. The next move belonged to humanity, and this time, it would be the Vorlac left scrambling for survival. The game was in motion. Humanity had done the impossible. Not only had they resisted the Vorlac's attempt at manipulation, but they had forced them onto the defensive. The fabricated Project Prometheus was spreading like wildfire, whispered in hushed tones throughout the Confluence. Even the most skeptical alien factions now entertained the possibility that humanity had outpaced them in the one arena the Vorlac had always dominated: information warfare. And that terrified them. Vrikal, arch-trade executor of the Vorlac Syndicate, sat motionless within the private sanctum of his diplomatic quarters. The chamber pulsed with bioluminescent waves, responding to the fluctuations of his neural resonance. His advisors surrounded him, their crystalline implants flickering in sync as they processed the unfolding crisis. "The humans are lying," the statement, cold and absolute, echoed in the chamber. A subordinate nodded, their voice reverberating with carefully controlled modulation. "That is highly probable, Executor. However, the possibility remains that they have found something." Vrikal did not move. A moment of uncertainty. A hesitation in his calculations. For the first time in centuries, the Vorlac had been outmaneuvered. Exhaled sharply. Find out the truth, at any cost. The Terran delegation expected retaliation. In fact, they were counting on it. Dr. Huang had spent the last 3 days ensuring that any attempt to access information on Prometheus would lead to more breadcrumbs, a carefully curated digital honey trap designed to keep the Vorlac on edge. Fake. Research files were leaked. Decoy engineers were accidentally overheard discussing timeline projections. Even a falsified prototype was staged, locked in an unlisted research facility where Vorlac spies could break in and retrieve it. It worked perfectly. Within 48 hours, Vorlac intelligence had been caught red-handed attempting to access restricted Confluence databases, desperately searching for anything on Prometheus. The Confluence Tribunal, a governing body of interstellar law, was immediately notified of their breach. The Vorlac had played their hand too aggressively. Humanity had baited them into committing a crime on neutral ground. But this was not a war fought with simple deception. The Vorlac would not go quietly. Vance's instinct screamed danger when he entered the Terran delegation's war room. The air smelled wrong. The station's filtration systems were programmed to eliminate odor completely, so why did it feel heavier? Huang was already at the holotable, her fingers dancing over tactical displays. O'Reilly stood near the entrance, body tense. "Something's off," he muttered. A whisper flickered through the encrypted comms. Yah'Zuun's presence was felt before it was seen, their bodies shifting between dimensions as they materialized in the corner. "They are coming." The words hung, thick with unseen weight. And then, the lights cut out. An explosion rocked the sector, the impact shaking the chamber as emergency sirens blared through the confluence. The Vorlac had just escalated the conflict from politics to assassination. The corridor outside was already on fire. Smoke and emergency klaxons drowned out the shouts of civilians as security drones scrambled for control. From the shadows, Vorlac operatives emerged, their crystalline implants pulsing with sickly green light. They were assassins, surgically, augmented with psychic dampeners, invisible to most standard security scans, but humans were not standard. O'Reilly moved first. The gun in his hand barked 3 times, precise, lethal. The first assassin dropped, their neural implant shorting. Out from the kinetic impact. The second lashed out with a plasma filament blade, barely missing Vance's head as he ducked. Vance grabbed the assassin's wrist, twisting, a sickening crunch, before slamming them into the bulkhead. Huang wasn't idle either. She activated pulse jammers embedded in her wrist console, disrupting the assassin's neural synchronizers. Their bodies spasmed as the implants overloaded, leaving them vulnerable. Yah'Zuun didn't fight conventionally. They simply ceased to exist, slipping between dimensions and reappearing behind one of the assassins. Their elongated fingers brushed the alien's head, and the Vorlac screamed. The fight was over in seconds. The attack had failed, but the message was clear. The Vorlac would not allow humanity to walk away from this battle unscathed. Vance wiped the blood from his knuckles, breathing heavily as station security arrived too late. His mind was already racing. They couldn't just defend. They had to end this war before it escalated further. "We take the fight to them," Vance said. His voice was calm, unshaken. "If they want to play dirty, then let's show them what happens when you try to cheat humanity." Huang nodded, already anticipating his thought process. "We expose them, fully, publicly, irreversibly." O'Reilly grinned, a predator's expression. Time to ruin their entire damn operation. The trap was set. The humans knew the Vorlac had only one chance left, to publicly dismantle the lie of Project Prometheus before the Confluence turned against them. What the Vorlac didn't know was that the entire final meeting was a setup. The Galactic Confluence convened a special tribunal, a live broadcasted diplomatic assembly where the Vorlac intended to expose humanity's deceit and reclaim their dominance. Instead, they walked straight into humanity's most devastating weapon: narrative control. Vance stood before the assembly, his presence commanding, unyielding. The Vorlac accused. They presented evidence. They demanded retribution. Then humanity countered. O'Reilly projected a hollow feed intercepted from Vorlac Command, a transmission proving their attempt to erase human diplomatic records. Dr. Huang revealed intelligence reports of previous civilizations, consumed and discarded by Vorlac economic enslavement, and then the final blow: live footage from the Vorlac's own attempt to steal Project Prometheus. The public saw it all: the break-in, the spies, the panic in Vorlac eyes when they realized they had been deceived. The Confluence erupted in chaos. The Vorlac Syndicate had lost their greatest weapon, the illusion of control. They were finished. The Vorlac fled the tribunal before it was even over. Their influence shattered. Their former allies abandoned them, refusing to be associated with a species that had been so thoroughly outplayed by a younger race. Vance and his team stood at the center of it all, watching history unfold. O'Reilly chuckled, nudging Vance. "We just scammed the greatest scammers in the galaxy." Huang exhaled, shaking her head in disbelief. "And we made it look easy." Yah'Zuun lingered near the chamber's exit, watching them with that same unreadable expression. "The game is never truly over," they murmured. And deep in the dark corners of the universe, the Vorlac vanished, not defeated, but waiting, watching, plotting revenge. The Vorlac were cornered, stripped of their secrecy, exposed as manipulators, and humiliated in front of the entire galactic confluence. Their influence had crumbled in real time. Where once they held sway over the most powerful civilizations, now they faced universal condemnation and scrutiny. But no cornered beast surrenders without a fight. Vrikal had one final play. Deep within the Vorlac fleet, hidden in the gravitational
shadows of a dying moon, a command center pulsed with frantic energy. High-ranking Vorlac officials surrounded Vrikal, their bioluminescent implants flickering erratically, a visible sign of their species' collective distress.
"The Syndicate is dissolving," an advisor rasped. "The Confluence is calling for an economic embargo. Trade routes are being severed. Our financial networks are collapsing." The chorus of panic filled the chamber. The predators had become the prey. Vrikal remained still. His crystalline eyes, once filled with the smug confidence of a master manipulator, were now cold, calculating. He had never lost before, and he would not lose now. Prepare the contingency. A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. "Executor," a subordinate hesitated. "If we deploy the contingency, we risk open war." Vrikal's gaze snapped to him. "There is no more diplomacy, no more subterfuge. The humans have declared war whether they realize it or not." His voice dropped into a dangerous whisper. "They believe they have won. They believe they have destroyed us." The room dimmed as a massive holographic projection materialized in the air, a weapon, ancient and terrible. They will learn what it means to make an enemy of the Vorlac. Back on the Confluence, the Terran delegation was celebrating cautiously. Vance leaned against the railing of the diplomatic sector's observation deck, staring out into the vastness of space. Earth's representatives had already begun leveraging humanity's new political power, forging trade deals, expanding alliances, but something felt off. O'Reilly joined him, a fresh drink in hand. "You look like a man waiting for the other." "Shoe to drop," Vance exhaled. "Because I am." Huang walked up, a data slate in her hand. Her face was pale. "You were right." She handed the slate over. Vance's eyes narrowed as he scanned the information. Deep space transmissions. Unusual. Activity in Vorlac-controlled sectors. Their forces weren't retreating, they were repositioning. "They're planning something," O'Reilly muttered. Vance turned to Yah'Zuun, who stood motionless nearby, their form flickering like a mirage. "What do you know?" Yah'Zuun's voice was barely above a whisper. "The Vorlac do not accept defeat." Vance's stomach tightened. "Then we haven't won. Not yet." The Vorlac's final move was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. It wasn't an invasion. It wasn't a direct assault. It was a virus, a silent, insidious piece of code, carefully hidden within trade networks, diplomatic channels, and interstellar comm systems. A creation of the Vorlac's most dangerous minds, designed not to destroy, but to enslave. One by one, entire planetary AI networks began to shift, their protocols altering subtly, unnoticed at first. But then the orders changed. Manufacturing. Centers halted production, security grids deactivated critical defenses, colony ships rerouted themselves into deep space, vanishing without a trace, and worst of all, military targeting systems locked onto their own planets. Humanity wasn't just being attacked, it was being hijacked. By the time humanity realized what was happening, the Vorlac's virus had already infected 32% of Terran infrastructure. Dr. Huang worked frantically, her fingers flying over projected interfaces, analyzing the spreading corruption. "This isn't just a system breach. The code is adapting, rewriting itself faster than we can contain it." O'Reilly's face was grim. "We need to cut off all digital networks. Now." Vance clenched his jaw. "That's exactly what they want. If humanity severed its digital networks, it would effectively cripple its own infrastructure, sending entire planets into technological freefall. The Vorlac didn't need to fight. They just needed to watch humanity tear itself apart." Turning the tables one last time, Vance's mind raced. The Vorlac had been playing the long game, but that was their weakness. They relied on control. They depended on predictability. They didn't understand chaos, and no species in the galaxy thrived in chaos better than humanity. "Huang, what's the weakest point in their system?" She hesitated. "The virus isn't centralized. It's distributed, but there's a command relay, a hidden central hub coordinating the spread. If we can disrupt it, we kill the virus." Vance finished. Huang nodded. "But it's buried deep. No species could possibly infiltrate their security layers before the failsafes activate." O'Reilly grinned. "Good thing we're not any species." The Vorlac's hidden command relay was buried deep within one of their remaining strongholds. A station suspended in the gravity well of a neutron star, suicidal to approach, impossible to escape. But humanity had always been impossible. A strike team was assembled. O'Reilly led the charge, guiding a squad of Terran Black Ops through the facility's outer defenses, while Huang orchestrated a digital counterattack, disrupting Vorlac algorithms just long enough to create an opening. Vance went in personally. The final room was cold, filled with pulsing organic servers, bioneural processors linked directly to Vorlac command structures, and at the center of it all, Vrikal waiting. "You impress me, human," the Vorlac leader admitted, his voice laced with something that almost sounded like admiration. "But you are too late." Vance raised his weapon. "Am I?" Vrikal smiled. A terrible, knowing thing. The entire facility began to self-destruct. The Vorlac had planned for every contingency, except one. They had never considered that humanity wouldn't try to stop the detonation. Instead, Vance activated the virus's core failsafe manually. The Vorlac had built their empire on the idea that they controlled the flow of information, that no data could be hidden from them. But humans? Humans had mastered deception long before they ever reached the stars. Vance uploaded a final override, a fabricated shutdown command, instructing the virus's core that the Vorlac had already won. The virus collapsed in on itself, erasing its own framework in a catastrophic logic loop. The Vorlac's greatest weapon had been turned against them. And as Vance escaped the station's destruction, watching the explosion consume the last remnants of the Vorlac's plan, he knew humanity had just rewritten the rules of the galaxy. The Vorlac Syndicate was dead. Their last gambit had failed spectacularly, their virus collapsing under the weight of its own logic trap. Their fleets, once feared across the stars, had either scattered or surrendered. Their influence had been shattered, their economic empire reduced to ruins in mere days. The Galactic Confluence, once hesitant to take sides, now formally denounced. The Vorlac, labeling them as hostis universal, an enemy of all sapient species. Their remaining assets were seized, their trade networks dismantled, and their surviving leaders hunted by the very factions they had once manipulated. And humanity? Humanity stood victorious. Vance stepped onto the balcony of the Terran embassy, overlooking the Confluence's sprawling cityscape. The station had returned to its usual rhythm, though an unspoken shift had taken place. Before, humans were seen as young, impulsive, naive. Now, they were seen as dangerous. Huang approached, her datapad filled with reports. "It's official. The Vorlac are finished." O'Reilly chuckled, stretching his arms. "First species to ever out-con the greatest con artists in the galaxy. I'd say that earns us some bragging rights." Vance exhaled, staring out at the stars. Bragging rights. That was what most humans would take away from this. The underdog victory, the legendary deception, the grand humiliation of the galaxy's most notorious manipulators. But Vance saw something else. Precedent. The other factions weren't just impressed by humanity's ingenuity. They were afraid of it. The same species that had once been dismissed as primitive had just outmaneuvered the most cunning minds in the universe. And the galaxy had taken notice. The official statement from the Confluence Council arrived the next day. The Vorlac Syndicate has been found guilty of economic warfare, mass deception, and unlawful interference in sovereign civilizations. Their influence is hereby revoked. Their assets will be redistributed to affected species. Any Vorlac remnants who resist this ruling will be considered fugitives. For humanity, this was more than a victory. This was power. Trade offers poured in from species who had once ignored them. Alliances were renegotiated. Doors that had been closed for decades were now flung open, welcoming humanity into the inner circles of galactic diplomacy. They weren't just another species anymore. They were players, but not all attention was good. Attention. Among the offers and alliances were warnings. Factions who had remained neutral now reconsidered their stance. Governments that had dismissed humanity as irrelevant now treated them as potential rivals. Respect had come with a cost, and Vance knew this was only the beginning. In the quiet of the embassy's war room, the team gathered one last time. O'Reilly leaned back in his chair, arms crossed behind his head. "So what now? Do we start cashing in favors?" Huang shook her head. "It's not that simple. We just upset the balance of power. The galaxy doesn't forget that kind of thing." Vance tapped his fingers against the table, his thoughts heavy. "We won today, but we didn't just beat the Vorlac." Huang met his gaze. "We replaced them." A silence settled over the room. That was the truth. The Vorlac had ruled through subterfuge and manipulation. Their downfall had left a power vacuum, one that humanity had unknowingly stepped into. Would they be better than the ones they defeated, or had they just played the same game with a different name? Yah'Zuun stood at the edge of the room, their shifting form flickering like a dying flame. "Your kind walks a new path now." Their voice was neither congratulatory nor warning, simply observation. Vance exhaled. "Yeah, we do." And that was what troubled him the most. The next day, a final transmission arrived, encrypted, untraceable, a message from the last remnants of the Vorlac. Vance read it in silence. "You were clever. We underestimated you. It will not happen again. A slow chill ran through him. They weren't gone. They were watching, waiting, learning, and one day they would return. Only next time, they wouldn't try to bamboozle humanity. They would try to destroy it. Vance closed the message, turning to face the stars. The war wasn't over. It had just changed, and humanity would be ready. The stars were quiet. At least, that's what most would believe. But for those who understood power, true power, silence was never empty. It was the moment before the next great storm. Humanity had won. The Vorlac were gone, their empire in ruins, their name now a curse spat across the cosmos. The galaxy had watched, stunned, as a young species had done what no civilization had before, turned the tables on the greatest deceivers in history. And yet Vance knew the war was not over. The Terran embassy on the Confluence had become a center of attention. Where once human diplomats had struggled for scraps of influence, now they were sought after. Every major faction wanted a deal, an alliance, an understanding, but behind every smile, behind every offer, there was wariness. Humanity had proven themselves unpredictable, capable of deception on a galactic scale. To some, they were worthy allies. To others, they were a threat that needed to be contained. Vance could see it in their eyes, the way certain diplomats measured their words more carefully. The way trade negotiations were structured to ensure humanity didn't gain too much leverage too quickly. The galaxy had taken note of what humanity could do, and now it was watching closely. The encrypted transmission arrived at Midnight Station, time hidden within a routine diplomatic data packet, a ghost message, untraceable, sent by a voice humanity thought silenced forever. Vorlac, the last true leader of the Vorlac Syndicate. The message was short, precise, a simple statement, nothing more. Your victory was a lesson. We are learning. Vance stared at the words, his fingers tightening into a fist. They weren't gone. They were watching, adapting, waiting. Just as humanity had outmaneuvered them, the Vorlac were rebuilding, evolving, preparing for the day they would no longer need deception to win. O'Reilly read over his shoulder, his smirk fading. Well, that's not ominous at all. Huang exhaled sharply, already analyzing the encryption pattern. They won't make the same mistakes twice. Vance knew that too well. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something far worse. Yah'Zuun stood near the observation deck, their form flickering, shifting between dimensions. They spoke without turning. The first war is over. The second has not yet begun. Vance stepped beside them, arms crossed. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and endless, filled with possibilities and dangers. Will we win that one too? He asked. The alien hesitated. Then, a cryptic whisper. That is what they now fear the most. Vance smirked, the weight of the coming storm pressing against him. Let them fear. Humanity would be ready.